Okay, welcome to the final go-to session of the month. This is the session for week 4, of course. This will mostly cover the stuff you need to know for this week, so we're mostly going to talk about the final project, the requirements, and some reminders. I'm also going to talk about revising and editing, but mostly we're just going to go through what you need to do this week. It's a pretty free week. There's this go-to session, and as usual, you have until Thursday at midnight to take the quiz over this session. But otherwise, you have an entirely free week to keep working on your public service announcement. You had a free week last week. Some of you may have used it, some of you may have not. But you know, we've had a little bit longer than usual to work on this final stuff. So let's get rolling. First of all, I have a question for you. And as usual, you can either raise your hand if you're brave enough to speak out loud, or you can just type something in the chat. But when you see these two words here, editing versus revising, like what's the difference? What is editing to begin with? I mean, when you hear that word, what does it mean? Caitlin says, I think of spell check when I hear editing. Yeah, that's a big part of it, right? Making sure that there are no errors when you submit something. So yeah, spelling. I would add to that grammar, right? That kind of stuff. Clinton says making it look proper. Yeah, that's certainly a big part of this class. Yeah, you know, I keep beating home this point in session after session, but I keep reminding people that remember there's an APA aspect to the paper, which can be either the easiest points you could ever gain or the easiest points to lose. So yeah, that's part of editing. Okay, good. How about revising? When you hear that word, how is that different from editing? If editing is mostly fixing things here and there, improving wording, like what is revising then? Because the title of this slide is editing versus revising. So how is revising different? Let's see, Clinton says adding more details. Yeah, I mean, I like that because that's focusing on content, right? Like adding stuff that needs to be there that wasn't before. Any other thoughts? Walter says updating. UK says correcting something that had already been done. Yeah, again, if it's correcting like on the sentence level, that's more editing. But revising it. By the way, the pictures sort of give you a hint because to the left is sort of what I view as editing, whereas to the right, that's more revising. And maybe the next slide will kind of help. Right? If we look at the word revise or revision, right, it has that word vision in there. So revision is more global. Editing is kind of fixing stuff here and there. Revising means taking a look at what you've done and really sort of looking at things anew, right? Kind of revisioning things. That's why I have this little picture here of a house that's being built. Because when it comes to your public service announcement, you have to remember, we're done with the essay. Okay, the essay is over, it's done with. It's an important part, it's an important step. It allows me to see what you're working on and to spot issues that I think are important for you to notice. But the PSA is a different kind of beast. If you've been checking email, you might know that I sent you a message yesterday where I actually spent spring break working on my own PSA because I think it's useful to sometimes go through and do the sorts of projects that I ask students to do. It's a reminder that what you're working on isn't so easy. It's a reminder of the sorts of challenges that you might face so that I can relate to them. But that PSA that I sent out, I mean, it required quite a bit of revisioning. I sort of skipped the essay part. I didn't write the essay. You know, there's only so much I'm going to devote to my free time during spring break. So I sort of skipped to the PSA itself. But if I had written the essay, it would have taken a different form. Like, I would have probably included information that didn't end up in the PSA. I had like 6 minutes worth of great material for that PSA. But because, by the way, if you haven't seen my PSA, it's a video. And if you look at the requirements for this assignment, the video is supposed to be around between 1 and 3 minutes. So I couldn't have 6 minutes worth of material, so I had to edit it down to 3 minutes. So yeah, there's a big difference, right? I mean, for the PSA, you're sort of forced to reimagine, to reconsider, to sort of look at things anew and put together your PSA. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes I get students who literally are handing in sort of their essay all over again. Especially for sometimes people who choose the audio option, because the audio PSA, in my mind at least, it's more like a radio spot, the thing you would hear on NPR or another radio station. PSAs used to be quite common in radio years ago, not so much anymore. But every so often I'll get an audio PSA that comes in that's literally the student just reading his or her essay out loud and calling it a PSA. And that's not what a PSA is. So keep in mind that for this assignment, you're not just taking your essay and fixing it up a little bit and somehow putting it in video form where you read your essay over a collection of images or record yourself reading it out loud and calling it an audio PSA. I mean, it really requires you to think about your material in a completely different way. You're covering the same ground in a lot of ways. Obviously, you're dealing with the same topic, but the PSA is something different entirely. So keep that in mind, okay? And it also means taking into account the peer feedback that you received. You all participated in that. Well, I actually extended the due date a little bit, so I made it available to be completed by Tuesday of spring break. But most of you completed this assignment, so be sure to look at the feedback that people wrote for you. You might agree with some of it you may disagree with. But the goal here is really to kind of sort through what makes sense to you. I mean, all the feedback you received from your peers, from me, is sort of designed to help you think about your topic a bit more. And this is also why I stressed, by the way, the importance of higher order concerns, right? The big stuff instead of the small stuff like grammar when you responded to one another. Because it's that big picture stuff that will really help you when it comes time to the public service announcement. If people can't quite see what your call to action is, or the message overall seems a little bit unclear, that's important stuff to notice. So going over that peer feedback is also an important part of this process to help you sort of revise, to revision what you're working on. And this leads me into my first two quiz questions. Here's quiz question number 1. I want you to summarize your group members' feedback on your essay. In other words, just briefly tell me who said what. Okay, so I want to make sure that you're actually going and reading what people have spent a lot of time doing, right? People are writing at least 250-word responses to 2 or 3 of their group members. So if you haven't looked at that feedback yet, you should, and kind of soak it in. Sometimes, I mean, most people do this, but occasionally there are students who, they post to the board, they write their responses, but then they never check back and look what their peers wrote for them. So quiz question number 1, really easy. Just summarize what your individual members said. Okay, here's quiz question number 2. Can I move on? If people either jotted this down or taken a screenshot. Now my phone is ringing for some reason, but we're going to ignore that. Quiz question number 2. How will the peer feedback influence your PSA project? Okay, so I want you to think about the feedback you received and tell me how it's going to make you think about things in a different way. Like, what will you need to do differently based on that feedback? Maybe you have nothing really much to do at all, but most of you probably have stuff that you could focus on. For the few of you, it's probably not many, probably not anybody in this session, because the people who show up to the sessions usually are pretty on top of things. But for the people who watch this later, if you receive no feedback, probably because you never posted a paper to the board, you can just focus on my feedback, okay? Like, how will my feedback influence your bigger project? I don't want people getting nailed. I don't want to be that mean instructor who is failing people because they can't answer the quiz questions because they didn't do that assignment from a week ago or something. So, okay. How will the feedback influence your project? Next, let's talk about citation. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty stuff. This will be the more useful stuff for you in this session. I'm going to try to keep this session somewhat short because it really is just a recap of what you need to be doing this final week and what you need to be reminded of. But remember, images and music that you use in your public service announcement, they need to be cited. Now, again, using either the chat or raising your hand It might seem like an obvious question, but you'd be amazed how many people don't think it's so obvious. I mean, why do we need to cite? I mean, really, what's the importance of citation? Like, why do it? I know it's a requirement of the class, and it says on the assignment sheet that you have to cite things. But really, if we're focusing more on the bigger picture, like, why is it important to cite things? Any thoughts? Any ideas? Caitlin says you need to give credit to the people who made the images and music. Yeah, that's a biggie. Walter says kind of the same thing, giving credit where it's due. Caitlin also added plagiarism. But I'm going to be mean and say that. Are you just saying that, or are you giving credit just because the assignment requires you to give credit? I mean, if you were, for example, working on a public service announcement on your own free time, not sure why you would do that, but maybe you're passionate about something and you wanted to upload it to YouTube or something, would you be so scrupulous to give credit, or would you sort of skip that step? Would you just grab images and music and say, it's out there? Yeah, so what's the bigger picture here? Like, I mean, what's the big deal about giving credit? Who cares? Why cite? Any thoughts? Walter says, "Well, if it was my work, I'd want to know where people came from." Okay, that's what I think we're getting close to it. Glenn says the same thing because I want credit. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it from the other person's perspective, right? I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with people using, let's say, a photograph I took or a short musical piece that I wrote on the keyboard, but I would kind of want them to give me credit. They don't have to give me an award. They don't need to write my name in big letters, but somewhere I would want them to sort of give credit for what I did. I think there are other important factors too. For example, and I think we're kind of getting at this, but if you remember the stuff that I talked about, even when we were talking about the essay, remember when I compared research to joining in on a discussion or a conversation? So even though we've moved past the essay, I mean, we're still talking about projects that you're working on, projects that you're handing in that are, in theory, your own creative efforts. And they are to a certain degree, don't get me wrong. But if someone else's images and music are part of that, well, they're kind of collaborators, right? They're kind of part of that discussion, that conversation, that project, if it's the PSA. So it just seems odd that you wouldn't give credit to your sort of team members. They might not be major team members. After all, you did the bulk of the work, but they've contributed to something as well, and it's important. It's important to give credit. And most of you are heading into fields where this will be pretty crucial. And this is what I kind of want to stress because, listen, I'm old. Okay, I'm 42, so that's like almost a grandfather, right? I grew up in a time before computers, before microwaves, when televisions only had 3 channels. But now we live in the YouTube generation, where it seems like we're just surrounded by so much information that it's all just out there to grab. Oh, there's an image. That's nice. I'm going to share it via Facebook. But who knows if that image really wanted to be put out there and be shared. Most of you, probably, I do the same thing. You go on YouTube and watch stuff. Have you ever seen the stuff that's out there on YouTube? Like people sometimes even just filming their television to record a show and then putting it up on YouTube. Or there are clips from Hollywood movies. And they're not released by like the people who are behind creating them. They're just people grabbing stuff and putting it online. And sometimes, yeah, people try to be diligent and get that stuff taken down. But there's so much stuff out there that we're kind of growing up in a society where we think we can just take things at will. And I'm not the citation police. I know that all of us probably in our free time have maybe done certain things. Maybe some of you have downloaded music that's not really that you didn't pay for. But at least for this class, where you're handing in projects that you're signing your name to, you have to give credit. And as I said, most of you are going into specific fields, right? Music production, recording arts, graphic design. Lots of fields where these issues are going to be really, really important. And if you kind of carry in this, I can grab whatever I want mentality into your career fields, like that could get you into trouble. If you're a budding music artist, if you sample a portion of someone else's song, you have to give credit for that because you didn't come up with that. So yeah, if I go to my next slide, The importance of citation, yeah, it's a requirement for this course. That's probably what gets more people in line than anything else. But yeah, the stuff we've gone over, right? You need to give credit to those who helped you. Oh, and something we didn't mention. Others might find your sources useful. Maybe that plays a bigger role in things like the essay, where, out in the real world, if I read a really interesting piece in a journal or something, like sometimes I'll find really interesting. Wow, can people hear the thunder coming from outside my window? It's raining here in Orlando. Yeah, I'll read articles, and sometimes the references page is incredibly useful because it leads me to other sources. So yeah, others might find the materials that you use helpful. And if you haven't kind of thought about what's on this slide, you might want to commit it to memory, right? Importance of citation, it's a requirement. You need to give credit to those who helped. Others might find your sources useful, because here comes quiz question number 3, which is just, why is it important to cite? The quiz questions for this final session are really, really easy. I feel bad that I have to give these quiz questions to make sure that people watch the sessions, but when people don't watch the sessions, then it leads to bigger problems. So yeah, just give me a general sense of why it's important to cite. Okay, I'm going to move on. We're going to keep rolling, because now we're going to get into the really good stuff, which is more information about citation, which might sound dry and boring, but I swear it's going to be incredibly useful. Okay, so how do we cite music? Here's the gist of it, and you can always come back to this individual moment, or if you think this is going to be useful now, you can take a quick screenshot. But what you see up top is the basic information you need to include. I'm not going to go over each detail. Most of you won't deal with this section in here recorded by artist, if different from the songwriter, because if you're using music, it probably should be coming from like the Westar music database, which actually, let me show that. Oops. Let me see if I can get there quickly. Okay, so here's our class. Let me see if we can get there quickly. Log in. I want to show you the Westar Music Database, and if you're going to use music files, what you need to do. So, okay, you've all been through this step before. We go to the library. We go to Research Databases. We go to Westar, which is at the very bottom here. We wait for the page to load. Am I signed in already? Yes. Okay, so let's just say I like this one a lot, right? I want something rock-based. And action and emotion. Okay, that fits my PSA. Let me click on there. And let's say I like this song a lot here. Letting Loose, okay? If we click here on complete track list, we get a lot of the core information that we need. So for example, Letting Loose. My control panel is actually blocking things. But if you see here, here's the title. There is a composer. Okay, so we actually have a lot of the information we need. And if we scroll down to the very bottom, we even get a year, 2013. So we actually have a lot of the information we need to create our citation. And if I go back to my PowerPoint thing, that's the example that I've used here. Right? This guy, Ivanov, I forget his last name that we just first name that we just looked at. The song title, the year, the name of the album. I forgot to highlight on the page, but the so-called name of the album, it's not an official album, is Rock, Action, and Emotion. And I just put Westar Music Publishing because that's the title, the kind of label. It's not a real label, but that's the label that appears on the main page there. So if you're just doing that and giving as much information as you can and following the basic rules of APA format, you're fine. So that's what you're going to do. Again, if you're using sound files, it's probably going to come from Westar, because if you remember the last go-to session, I pretty much told you that's where your sound file should be coming from. There are exceptions. For example, if you do watch the PSA that I shared with all of you via email, I made that using iMovie, and there's music in the background, but that actually comes from iMovie's sound bank file, so it's kind of built into the program already, so I didn't need to go out and find that music. But if you're using music, it should be coming from a place like Westar, okay? Every so often, I get a project that comes in, and it's like, oh gosh, that's Rihanna beginning the song. Very nice. I like that song a lot. But you can't use it, right? So images and music that you use in your projects, if you do use them, need to not only be cited properly, they need to be allowable in the first place. So yeah, grabbing a Rihanna song or grabbing a Taylor Swift song or whatever that's a big no-no. Okay, but if you need like general instrumental stuff that you want to have playing in the background, Westar database is a good place to go. Okay, citing images. Again, here's the basic form. I'm not going to go over each little detail, but basically the author here is the photographer or the person who created the image. And then it's pretty similar to the stuff you've been doing with your previous APA. You know, you're going to put the year in parentheses, the title, and so on. And here's an example of what one looks like. Okay. Creator of the image, the name of the image, taking a test. You put in brackets what kind of image it is, if it's a photograph, if it's some sort of other image, and then just a retrieve from line. Okay. And what I want to quickly show is, what you should do to find this information. So, for example, in the week, what was it? The week 3 go-to session, I spent a bit of time talking about that site compfight.com, basically telling you that if you do need images, you should be going to compfight. So let me do a search for, I don't know, kittens. And remember, if you go to compfight, just ignore the stuff above the dotted line because you have to pay for that. Make sure you have commercial clicked because that's what you need. And let me see if I can find one that works well. Oh, here's a kitten. Who doesn't love kittens? This one will work okay. Let me see if I can find one that actually has a person's name attached to it. How about this one? No, that one doesn't have one either. Maybe I should have prepared this in advance. Let me just click on any image and see if we can get something good. You know what? These are too artsy. Let me get something that's a little bit more. How about students? I want a picture that clearly is kind of like not super professional. Okay, so let's try, I don't know, this one. We'll just stick with it. Compfight's an awesome site, but it's a little bit difficult to find the basic information you need. If you look in the photo credit here, this basically will take you nowhere. This is just HTML that needs to be plugged into a website. But if you actually find the URL and highlight it, as I'm doing now, and copy it, and then paste it into your browser, you'll be taken directly to that image's site, which is important because you'll need this specific URL when you cite things. And let me move my control panel out of the way. And as you can see here, you get all the pertinent information. Claire Mano is the author. That's probably not her real name, but that's the name we're going to use as the author. There's even a title, Chinese class. There's a date, 2007. So you have all the relevant information you need. You just kind of have to find it in Compfight because it's not there so obviously. But once you have it, then you can create your APA citation. One final thing. I actually didn't mention this in the week 3 session, though I should have. There's one other place you can go to for photos. I like Compfight because the pictures are a lot nicer and they're a lot more colorful. Did I close it? Yes. Let me go back to the library database real quick. Research databases. I should have mentioned this last time. But you have this thing called AP Images Collection. A number of the images I used in my PSA came from here. About half came from Compfight, about half came from here. And once you're in, you can do a search. So my PSA topic was on Common Core. And I'll even add the word education just so it doesn't confuse it with other searches for core. And here we get a lot of pictures, okay? Like for instance, I use this picture in my PSA. If I click on it, it brings it up. And you can then download it. But here it gives you all the information you need. If you scroll down, you get things like the date it was created, okay? So 2014. Usually it gives a person responsible. So here, the photographer, AJ Mast. So there you have an author's name. Most of these AP images don't have official titles, but they do have an image ID, which is what I recommend just using for the title. And And actually, let me switch real quickly. Oh, by the way, the AP images, you don't have a firm URL to give. Like, there's no web address that you can just put in there that's going to take me to the image, which is why this number here is so important. But like, here's a list of my references. These are just the images. I didn't put in any of the articles that I read and used in my PSA. These are just all the images. But as you can see here, like, these are the ones that came from CompFight. And these are the ones that came from AP Images. So author, year, I use that reference number for the title, and mention the date I retrieved it from the database, and then I just put from AP Images, because that's about the most clear way you can indicate where it came from. And notice too, like, if someone has a wacky username, not a real name, I just use that as the author. So Woodley Wonderworks, I have no idea who that is, but that's the author name that I'm using. Okay, so let me go back to the PowerPoint thingy. So when you're dealing with images or music, these are the basic rules to follow, and you can either come back to this video, which I know is a pain unless you've been taking screenshots while I've been doing this, or you can go to the course dashboard, where some of these things are available to you under the References tab. So where is it? Oh, APA formatting for electronic images. If you click on this, it goes over the stuff I just went over. I don't have a specific music one, so you'll have to frustratingly look back at this session if you're not sure how to cite music. But that's basically the rules you need to be following. You need to be creating a reference list that's much like this, okay? And as you'll notice, I have like, what, maybe 9 images or 10 images. And look, I've carefully put all of them in APA format. And you follow the same rules you've been following all month. So if there's no date, you just put ND, right? So the same rules are being followed. But you need to be citing every image, every piece of music on an APA-style references page. Okay, back to this, even though I'm probably going to get away from it in just a second. And the final thing I want to go over is what you're doing for the final project portfolio. If you've read through the final project assignment sheet, you pretty much maybe know what you're supposed to do, but I'm going to go over it very, very quickly. And actually, I probably should have just stayed on this page. Let's see, I think I already have this open. Okay, so here's your assignment information, right? It's due Sunday, week 4, which is this coming Sunday. There's a minimum of 250 words for the reflection part of the assignment. I'll get to that in a second. It's worth 15% of your grade. You can read through the rest of it on your own. I should probably revise things here. Some instructors, we all share like common assignment sheets, and we're supposed to edit them at will. So I don't require a cover page, APA-style cover page in my class, so you don't need to do this part. But everything else you do. So basically your final project is going to include your finished PSA. You're going to provide me with a link, probably, that takes me there. If you're working on a song or jingle, you'll probably, most people upload it to SoundCloud, which is like the YouTube for audio. It's a place where people can share songs, spoken word recordings, anything that's audio. And all I have to do is get the link. If you're making a video, you can upload it to YouTube or Vimeo, or you can just give me the link if you have it saved somewhere, like in a Dropbox account. So basically, I just need a link to your project, okay? That's the most important thing. Dustin says, for a video, can we put the reference in the credits? Yeah, you can do that. And there are basically 2 ways to handle it. If you want to put in a perfectly formatted APA-style references page on the final image of your video, that's fine. Or if you just want to do it kind of more casually and submit an APA-style references page in addition, that's fine. But you can't just like list generically on your own, oh, this image is from Sarah Jones, it's called Boy with a Balloon, taken in 2012 on your video, and just leave it at that. I still need APA adherent references. But yeah, that's actually a good idea. If I had more time, I probably would have closed my my PSA. I'm getting my acronyms confused. I probably would have concluded my PSA with something like that, because if you go to the YouTube link that will take you to my PSA, if you find my email from yesterday, I just put the reference list of photos in the YouTube description for the video. They don't actually appear in the PSA itself. But notice, in addition to the PSA, you have to write a reflective essay that basically answers these questions, and it should be at least 250 words. So as long as you write a couple paragraphs or one long paragraph or something answering these questions, you should be fine. And finally, there are some kind of rules you should be following. I'm actually going to show a visual example of what you should be doing instead of kind of reading through this boring stuff. Let me just quickly point out that if we look at the rubric, you'll notice that the PSA itself is worth 30% of the overall final project grade. So it's not that the PSA isn't important, but it's not the be-all and end-all of the entire project grade. I mean, it is true other parts are connected to it, so if you don't provide me with a script or lyrics, you can lose points for that. Grammar, that applies to both the reflection that you'll write and the grammar that's included in your project. APA formatting applies, but really, the PSA isn't the entire grade, which is both good and perhaps bad. It's good because if you're concerned that maybe you didn't create the greatest PSA, it's not worth the whole thing. So be aware there is a pretty big spread here, so it's not all about the project, though it mostly is, because some of this other stuff also plays a role. Okay, let me show you what I wanted to talk about, which is what your final project should look like. Let's see, do I have it open already, or do I need to go find it? I have to go find it. Let's see. Documents. And of course everything is blocking, so I have to move stuff out of the way. Bear with me 2 seconds. This is incredibly useful, or else I wouldn't be doing it. What did I save it as? Sample. There we go. Okay. Sorry for the delay. This is essentially what you're going to be handing in, okay? Let me move this out of the way. You'll be following APA style format, right? I don't require a cover page. Some other instructors do. I just don't think it makes much sense to have a cover page for a document that's sometimes only a couple pages long. So just follow the things you've been using for the essay, right? So we have a running header. You have your information up here. You have a title. I've called mine Common Core Project because that was the name of my PSA, Common Core. And you'll have a link to your project. So if you click on this link, for instance, it will take you to my PSA. Then there comes the script. I haven't reproduced the entire script, but I've put the beginning of it in here. If you're doing a comic or a poster, or some of you got approval to do a graphic design style print ad, you don't need a script because all of your wording is going to be in the finished project itself. But if you're doing a video or an audio spot or a song or jingle, yeah, I need the script and or lyrics. One, it's easier for me to follow along. Second, I want like some level of proof that you're working from a script. Again, I just spent spring break creating a PSA. And I work from a script. I don't understand. Every so often I see students who literally just flip on the camera and start speaking. And I don't know how people do that. I mean, I needed a script to work from. As a matter of fact, the beginning of the PSA and the end, I actually appear on camera. So those lines I had to rehearse because I had no cue cards to work from. And then the other stuff, it's mostly voiceover, so I could read that out loud off the page. But yeah, there was a script. I mean, I don't understand how you can plan things without a script. So I want to see some evidence of that. And then if we go to page 2, here are those references, right? I want your references there. Please include the references that you created for your essay as well, because probably those are informing your PSA on some level. And plus, if you got APA right the first time around for that assignment, it's really just a matter of chugging and plugging, right? You take those references and put them in here. Make sure they're in alphabetical order, but you're going to put them in here. But there should be a nice long references list. And then your reflection. Okay, that 250-word reflection. This is also under that references tab on the course dashboard. So if you're ever confused about what it should kind of look like. So yeah, instead of going over the assignment guidelines, I mean, this is basically, you can always look at this to give a sense of what you're doing. And Dustin laughed at Instructor McLovin. Yeah, who hasn't seen that movie? That's my pathetic attempt to seem hip and relevant, neither of which I am. Okay, final quiz question. I want you to tell me how will your final project show your development as a writer during the month. Okay, and I mean writer in the broadest term possible because, again, you're not literally always writing in the traditional sense for your public service announcement. But think about everything we've talked about this month. So, everything from topic selection to narrowing things down to audience awareness. I mean, you can cover whatever you want. Just explain to me how you think your final project is going to show your development in the course, okay? Because all that stuff is writing related, even if you don't have your pencil in hand, even if you're not typing away in front of your computer. Okay, and be honest. Don't give me BS that you don't really believe in. Don't tell me, oh, I really love logos and ethos, and you probably don't even remember what those terms mean. You can use fancy terms, or you can use your own language to describe how your PSA is going to show your development. Okay. Now, questions. I told you this was going to be fast. 40 minutes, we got that done. 35 if we did count the fact we started at 5 after the hour. No, there are only 4 questions for this one, Dustin, so yeah. And we'll see. I can't remember if I have this quiz set up for 4-question format or 5, but you remember from week 1. When there are 4 questions, I just give you 20 dummy points for the blank question, so don't worry. It all works out in your favor. Cesar wants another question. Well, I wish I had one in my pocket. I don't think anybody else wants an additional quiz question. But honestly, questions about anything we've went over. Citation, what you need to be including, how you're supposed to be handing stuff in, revising, PSAs. Oh, someone's hand is up. Let's see who that is. Okay, it's Dustin. Dustin, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. So there you go. Ask away.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. My question is, so for instance, well, I ran into this dilemma a couple projects down. If any of us, if we don't get it, if the Full Sail platform doesn't let us upload it, we can email you the direct link for like that. If we make a video to YouTube or whatever, we're allowed to we'll get credit that way too, right?
Yeah. I mean, I probably should have mentioned this earlier in the term. And when people do run into technical problems, it's always good that I know about it in advance, or it's just to keep yourself safe. Don't email me the next day or something. Just get me your portfolio, even if it's through email. But at the same time, I'll caution people to remember that you should be allowing yourself hopefully enough time that you're not waiting until 11:59 p.m. on Sunday night to hand things in. But yeah, if there's a big problem and I check my inbox the next day and see that you emailed me something at 11:55 because you were having problems, then yeah, I'll certainly count that as being on time. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and silence you. Back to the shadows. Okay, anybody else with questions? Let's see, did I miss anything? UK is saying something about how he found sound effects at Westar, but I cannot find a composer. Yeah, did you, UK, I mean, make sure you click on the full link like I did there, where if you click on it, it shows you the full track listing. But if there's no composer, then you're just going to leave that out. You're following the same APA rules that you would for anything else. So if there's no author, you just leave that section blank and start with the song title. Okay? Any other questions? Some people are already dropping out of the room. Hey, the good news is I'll be able to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. at 8 o'clock if we finish up. Cesar says, if I'm writing a song... Cesar's question is coming in short bursts. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording this right now because I feel bad for the people who watch this later. They're going to think this is like the worst part of the session. So, oops, I don't want to do that. So for people who are watching this archive session, I'm going to stop recording right now. Oh, don't even tell me. Oh, there it is. Oh, this could be the worst session imaginable as people watch me stumble through this stuff. Okay, keep.